Hi.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you too. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you.
So let me introduce myself. My name is Lesi Kульчинської. I'm a curator of educational program of Kyiv Art Week this year. And this year, educational program is dedicated to the understanding of relationships between art and money and art and market, which I see as a task of self-reflection for the Kyiv Art Week itself as an art fair. So
Yeah.
I would like to touch this topic a little bit in our conversation, but not only this, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And this year, your video work for BMW is exhibited at our exhibition at Kyiv Art Week, which is online this year. So I would like to start the conversation from it, and probably you would tell a few words about this work. How was it created? What was your concept behind it? What was your approach?
Sure. So obviously working at a time where we can't be together, we had to create the project completely remotely, which is actually something that through my work I do nearly every time. You know, it's rare that I'm actually with a product or a person that's featured within my work. But I think it's important to mention because I think this kind of work that I do sort of speaks to a new era and a new way of creating. So the sort of main ingredient I received was a CAD 3D model of the BMW car. And then my concept for the project was to sort of reinterpret and reimagine the car and to sort of take it into a sculptural form and think about how the shapes of the car and the energy of the car kind of speak within a sort of more artistic context. So I did that through a mixture of 3D animation, which is something that I have explored in my work for sort of the last 6 or so years. And I also worked with artificial intelligence on this project, which is something I've been looking at and really interested in for sort of, again, probably the similar amount of time, maybe a bit shorter, but it's something that's become a lot more sort of commonly sort of accepted and utilized within sort of artistic projects. And it's something that I've sort of been investigating. So my idea was to feed press images and the 3D data of the car into an AI that we built. And the AI was then tasked with the idea of then creating new forms and visions of the car, which is super exciting because it becomes a collaboration with the computer, which is something that I kind of see throughout my work.
Interesting. So can we say that this work was created together by you and artificial intelligence? Do you see it as a co-creator, or can you say that the authorship is split between you, or you as a creator in this process?
It's an interesting question because I think with an artificial intelligence at the moment, it's very much still taught what to do. It doesn't sort of go off and start sort of creating something that you know, it's always sort of predetermined to an extent. It's taught the concept that it will study images and then reimagine those. But for me, it is a collaboration because I don't have a clue what's going to come out the other side of the machine, which is exciting because I think you know, within any art, it's nice to not go in with a predetermined idea and for things to sort of evolve in quite an organic way. And for me, AI allows that sort of organic process where it will show me things that I can't imagine or wouldn't have predicted, and then allows me to react to that. So it does become a real conversation rather than, you know, it's not just a piece of software, it becomes a collaborator.
Interesting. So can you compare this experience with collaboration with another artist, for example, when you discuss something and then the person gives you some result that you cannot pre-imagine, as you said? Is it comparable, or this is something different still?
No, for sure. I think it's the same kind of thing. A lot of my work is collaborative. I work with different fashion designers and musicians, and you know, I really enjoy sort of entering their world. I see a lot of what I do is building virtual worlds. So I take concepts and ideas and then create a sort of digital landscape from them. And for me, it's the same kind of relationship with an AI, although obviously somewhat different because it's sort of, you can't communicate in the same way, you don't interface in the same way. but just the sort of the back and forth and the sharing is definitely something that's sort of relatable to human relationships I have.
Interesting. And did you feel any subjectivity of this artificial intelligence?
I mean, it's a difficult question because, again, I think it goes back to the idea that it is a trained tool. And I think that often AI is seen, it's a kind of a buzzword still at the moment, that it's seen as the end result of something. And there's definitely a kind of curation that I perform on its output. So it's still sort of under my eye, you know, so it still sort of has my intent behind it. So I think that it's to see it as a tool is a healthy thing, and not to see it as the sort of the end result or the sort of sole creator of things. You know, it allows me to sort of create variety.
Mm-hmm. So you control in the process.
I do control the process, but I let it have its fun at the same time.
Sorry, I'm just curious about this relationships between human and artificial intelligence, and I'm just thinking, can you compare it to the, for example, if you hire someone to do a creative work, and you hire a designer, for example, and you set in some parameters and then expect that person will do the work according to it. Is it similar?
Yeah, I think it is similar. I think that one thing that I think interests me about AI though is that it often gets things wrong. And I think that there's, you know, that's quite an interesting point at this sort of a moment in time where AI obviously has a much wider reach beyond the artistic industries. You know, we've been using it within our phones, for example. Every time we take a photograph, it sharpens and perfects things. But to sort of use it within a very creative context, I often mislead it, or mistrain it, so that it becomes a bit more organic and humanized, because obviously all of our output isn't perfect as an artist, as a human. So I think it's important to sort of keep it within those terms. So to some extent, I kind of like the idea of humanizing it and letting it sort of do things wrong, because in my work I see mistakes as things that give sort of an organic nature to technology. I think technology is often perceived as being a very cold, rigid thing, but often it can be sort of beautiful and unexpected and strange and funny. And you know, it's those kind of topics I explore throughout my wider body of work, really.
That's a really interesting point. So can we say that these mistakes of technology is kind of its creative source?
Yeah, definitely. I've always been interested in you know, how images can be disrupted. You know, things like data moshing, which isn't so popular now, but the idea of sort of breaking videos so that it sort of it looks like wet paint, you know, and kind of glitches and things like that have been common throughout my work, just because I think working within this medium, that kind of visual language is important to explore. It not only humanizes it, but it also sort of gives new life to things.
Do you think creative process by human being is similar in this moment? I mean, that mistakes is also the source of human creativity as well as in case of.
I think so. I mean, creative output always, you know, it's not a consistent, measurable thing, and I think that, you know, people's mistakes lead them into new directions. Whether that's something subtle, you might not even be recognized as a mistake. Everything sort of leads you down a path. So I think that anything that can sort of disrupt that, you know, a singular vision is important.
Interesting. Yesterday I read an interview with Nick Knight, who's your colleague, I guess, because you worked at Show Studio, right?
I do, yeah.
And he was asked a question whether he considers his work to be art, and he answered that it's not a question that I ever posed myself at all. I'm quoting, "It's not something that seeking the answer would help me to do my next piece of work. It wouldn't help me understand my work any better." So his answer was that he doesn't care at all about this question. And I would like to pose it to you as well. Do you pose this question to you? Like, for example, do you consider this artwork, this work that you made for BMW as an artwork, or you don't think this question is important or relevant, or what would be your answer?
I mean, I think that it's a creative vision of something, and I think within that definition, it is artwork. It's not I don't sort of think of everything, likewise to the quote, I don't think of everything I do as art. I think this is the only thing I can do, and it's the only thing that sort of interests me, and I don't, you know, it sort of falls beyond a definition for me. It feels like the right thing for me to be exploring within, you know, each project leading into the next is just sort of inspires beyond that.
But do you think this question is important? I mean, today everything is so blurred, like the boundaries between different areas are so blurred. Do you think it's still important to ask this question, whether it's art or not, whether you are artist or someone else? Do you put in this question to yourself?
I think it is an important question, because I think it's always important to recognize artistic output and creative industries. I think that especially with what I do, I think it can very quickly fall into being about the technology rather than the messages behind the work. And for me, it doesn't really matter what I'm using, whether it's AI or 3D animation, but it's about the kind of the images I want to convey or create that sort of speak to concepts I'm exploring. So I think that it is an artistic sort of endeavor. And I think it is really important, especially at the moment with things like the pandemic, to sort of value the artistic industries and to sort of for it to retain agency.
Excuse me, the last two words I didn't.
I think it's important for the artistic industry to be retained and for it to sort of retain its weight around it.
I see. Do you think do you discriminate the concepts of creativity and art? Do you think it's something different, or it's the same?
For me, it's the same thing. I don't sort of see them. I don't really see the sort of separation there.
Okay, thank you. And next question is, what is your own standard of your perfect work? Like, what qualities your work should have for you would be totally satisfied with it, or maximum satisfied with it?
I mean, it's difficult because I always see the projects I'm working on at the moment as part, as I said before, it's kind of an ongoing investigation. So it's never finished. There's never really a point where I look at things and think that, you know, I've done everything now. So it sort of leads me on to the next thing, which I think is, you know, that's always inspiring, that, you know, the BMW project then leads me down a path of, you know, I might see something within that can then inform something else. So it's kind of a dialogue that continues for me. I don't believe there is such thing as perfect piece of work.
Sure. So the process is important for you, as I understood. The process of
I think the process is the thing that inspires me the most, and it's the part that I enjoy the most. It's sort of every project I make, there's probably 90% of it never gets seen, because it's kind of it gets sort of hidden away on a hard drive somewhere, and maybe it's only the 10% that sort of makes it into the final piece. But you know, that 90% is for me equally valuable.
But how then you decide which part of it to show and which part of it to keep for yourself?
I mean, it's never too easy, because I think that leads on to quite a good point about, you know, working within 3D is interesting, because there are no sort of fixed parameters within 3D. You can create anything, literally. You know, when you open a 3D piece of software, you just have an infinite black space that you can then, you know, you could build a city, you could build a mountain range. There's no such thing as gravity or physics, and so you can really define everything within that world. So and that can be really scary actually, because there's no sort of limit to what can be done. But I think it's just about for me, it's always important to sort of retain the original concept, and to always be delivering that as sort of elegantly as I can. Art is communication, and although my work sort of goes into the abstract side of things, I think it always tries to speak to an idea or a concept. So as long as the work sort of speaks to that, that's where I sort of define what's sort of left in or removed.
And what are you doing with all that 90% that is kept on your computer after the work is finished? Do you use it for another project, or I don't know?
Not really. I think it goes off somewhere. It goes off into the cloud, and isn't really seen again usually. But for me, it sort of leaves ideas. It leaves inspiration within it. I don't sort of go back and look at things, because I think it's healthy to keep progressing forwards. I think it would be quite easy to sort of use things and reappropriate them. But I think that it's super important to sort of start again each time and work through things like you've never worked on anything before, because you find new ways of doing things that, and find new mistakes, new avenues.
You work a lot for clients, as I saw on your website, and I would like to ask you, what do you appreciate most? What do you like the most, to work for clients or to work, because you also are exhibiting widely, so what do you like more, working for clients or work for the exhibition, or just work for yourself?
I don't really see any difference between them, because when I'm working although I guess working for a client is exciting for me, because I work within the music and fashion industries, and in art and things, and sort of moving between those different industries is really inspiring for me, because you get a window into that person's world, into that client's world. So working with like a fashion designer like Gareth Pugh, who I worked with recently, you sort of you're allowed access to his ideas and his sort of dreams of what things can be. So that's really exciting for me. I think I don't really see a difference in my personal work and commercial work. I sort of treat it all the same. I sort of go in with the same sort of level of expectation, always try, obviously try my best on everything. And it's always about sort of, if it's personal work, I sort of treat myself as the client. And there's not really a separation.
I see. That's interesting. Are you a demanding client for yourself?
Probably the hardest client.
The hardest. And one more question from Nick Knight's interview that I would like to address you as well. When you take on a commercial assignment like fashion or music video, do you think of it as your own work or as a client work?
Definitely as a collaboration, because working on a music video, for example, you've got the themes and the messaging already there within the lyrics. So it's then my job to then help to visualize that. And often a musical artist has a sort of predetermined idea of how their music looks. They kind of live within that. So it's just my job to help realize that. So it's definitely always a collaboration, and collaboration is so important to what I do.
Do you feel any limitations when you work with clients, or you feel absolutely comfortable in this exchange of tasks?
I think that having limitations is always a good thing. I think like it sort of speaks to the idea that anything can be possible. So it's always good to have those boundaries and to have the sort of parameters that you can sort of work to. And I think that's where the best projects happen, where you sort of understand where someone wants to go, but maybe you push it forwards a little bit, but you're not sort of completely reinventing things or alienating things. I think it's equally as important to know when to hold back, and when and how to work commercially is really important.
Probably these restrictions is might be useful, especially when you work with the 3D and technological the stuff that you said, which is kind of limitless possibilities.
Exactly, and that's something that I think it's really important to keep in mind, because I think it could be easy to continue trying things and testing things forever, but it's always important to start with a sort of very definitive idea of what the concept is to be communicated, and then very quickly you can sort of build a framework around that.
But do you ever think to quit this client-oriented work and start your own artistic career like independent artist? Do you have this, I don't know, thought?
No, because I think that they're all of the projects I do speak within the sort of quite a linear journey of where I'm going. So that, you know, the ideas I look at within commercial work are often things that I sort of am interested in personally, and I try to bring a bit of myself to commercial projects. So I don't ever really see a separation there.
I see. So you never had this dilemma, like which way to choose, commercial work or independent artists path?
I don't know. I haven't actually, because I think also at the moment in sort of where we are with social media and things like that, I can sort of create a piece of work just for myself and publish that on my Instagram, and then, you know, that becomes part of my body of work straight away. Whereas I might be working on a commercial project for sort of 6 months. So for me, it's sort of it's about sort of building up a wider world of work that I create, and I don't think it's necessary to sort of define commercial and non-commercial. You know, both interest me.
I see. And do you have any like the most important issue you work with at any project? Like, you know, some problematics that interest you, that you this or that way go back to it, whatever you do?
I think that the idea of technology itself is something that I look at, which by using technology kind of is quite a meta thing. So I often look at sort of, the internet as a sort of aesthetic in itself. So kind of like the user interfaces we use every day. I sometimes bring some of those into the projects, just because I think that that's such an interesting sort of ongoing development within that, you know, the semiotics of the internet, and you know, the sort of darker side of the internet is something that interests me. You know, the ideas of loneliness and isolation. You know, I kind of enjoy exploring those topics because they feel so current and also fit the medium quite well.
Yeah. Do you believe that one day we all be living in their virtual reality?
I mean, I think that we do already.
Me too. I always when I first wear these VR glasses, and then when I took it off, I had the feeling that, you know, I'm already there, and you know, that the reality is already VR.
Exactly. I think that the thing is that we have phones in our hand that have almost become another limb. You know, that they're so glued into, you know, they're part of our body now.
Yeah.
I think that is an augmented reality. You know, we live so much of our life through technology already. I don't think there's going to be a big moment where suddenly everyone's got a big headset on and we're, you know, flying through virtual space. I think that it's going to be a slow transition, but we already, you know, even the way that we go and explore real world places, we use map app on our phone to find out how to get there. I think the transition is definitely already sort of well underway. And I think that things like augmented reality seem like a plausible future. The idea that data is overlaid to our real world and it becomes, you know, more of a seamless experience, that one day we won't have a device and it will be sort of a singular experience. That's just, you know, that's just how I see it going.
Are you looking forward to it?
I mean, the internet and technology in general can be problematic. And in some ways, it's sort of easy to wish for quite a simpler time where people could go offline and people can have a bit more space. I think it's easy to feel quite bombarded by things like social media and to feel pressured from it. So I think that our relationship with technology has obvious negatives, but I'm looking forward to the world being even more open and for people being able to share their ideas in a more seamless way. And I think the idea of being able to create experiences in virtual worlds that people can experience is exciting. I think that as long as the humanity, as long as sort of creativity is driving it, I think that there are a lot of potentials.
I noticed that in your work, in your like visual sculptures, they have this quality of biomorphicus, if I can say it. How do you feel? To what degree technology is similar to nature?
I mean, technology comes from a place of nature because we are organic beings. So again, it's sort of for me, there's not really they're kind of one and the same. A lot of technology references the organic world in the way that things are constructed and designed. In architecture and things, we look at how bees create hives, and we look at the natural world for inspiration there. But I think that some of my work that feels more organic kind of speaks to the idea that technology isn't a cold, sharp, hard thing, and it can be more humanized and can feel like something that sort of lives a bit beyond its sort of construct. And I also look a lot outside of the world of technology for inspiration. So I sort of create quite organic structures that I post on my Instagram quite a lot that kind of reference Dutch still life painting, because it's just something I've always loved, and I've always loved natural history, and I loved artists like H.R. Geiger, and all of that together kind of is my interest beyond my medium. I feel that just because I work with technology doesn't mean that I sort of should look just within that world.
For me, as I'm not a person who is very good at technological issues, so I have this feeling of of mystery in the the technology has its own mystery, and this is the point where technology is similar for me with nature, because it's something that has the life of its own, something like that. Do you have the same feeling?
Definitely. I think things like AI feel more organic. They begin to blossom, and they sort of go off to create things. And there's I am definitely not an expert in AI, and for me there's a lot of mystery about what's happening within the computer. I like to imagine how the AI is thinking, and for me I quite like that there's sort of a mystery about it. And I definitely agree with you that it feels like a sort of almost supernatural organic process that's happening, and I think that there's a bit of magic there.
Yeah, exactly. Do you feel any rivalry with artificial intelligence? Do you feel that it has something that you cannot achieve, or it can have some potential that?
I mean, not at the moment, because I could very much just turn off my computer and it would be dead. But I think seeing it as a tool and something that I can harness and explore within my work, there's definitely not a rivalry. It's more sort of working with that to try and understand it and try and unpack it. I think that there's technology can be
But probably in the future, do you believe that artificial intelligence can be like a great artist?
I think that it's a really difficult question, because I think for artwork comes from a place of communication, I think, and as long as the artist has something to say, I think that then that becomes the artwork, the message behind it, rather than the physical output. So for me, it's hard to work out whether computers have something to say, you know,
That's
but maybe one day they will.
But how do you think, where does it come from, this message, like, that you try to convey with the artwork?
I think that it's just something that, you know, it's just happened throughout our history, isn't it? It's just people trying to express concepts and feelings and things that are happening in the world around them. And whether that's with technology or not, I think that's quite a sort of natural human desire to try and sort of externalize their feelings. Yeah.
I see it. And yeah, as a sculpture, you work mostly with the digital sculpture, but do you have a desire to work with the real sculpture, like material sculpture?
The short answer is no, because because I feel that you know, I've been using technology in my artwork for the last sort of, I'd say 5 years properly. You know, I was exploring that. You know, I came from a photography background and then worked at Show Studio with Nick Knight, and it's there that I was sort of given the opportunity to investigate technology. Obviously, Nick's been a huge champion of that through his own work, and that sort of inspired me to go off and sort of learn and think about how I could, you know, harness this in my own way. And I feel that even in those last 5 years, technology is it's increased in capability so much it's not recognizable from the start. And I think that I'm just on the beginning of a journey with technology that I'd like to sort of keep going with. I don't sort of see I don't really have the desire to create physical things, because I think the virtual world is something that sort of excites me more.
But have you ever tried to work with the real sculpture?
I've never worked with real sculpture, but I must say that seeing any sort of images or pictures I make printed is I still find super exciting, because a lot of the time I spend so much effort and dedication on one image that I then see published on Instagram this big. And it's been completely compressed and the quality looks awful and you lose all of the detail. So seeing things printed for me is a luxury, because you can, you know, having a presence of a physical object there's no question about it, you know, is a very powerful thing.
Yeah.
But I do think that, you know, a lot of the work I've started to do with musicians, for example, on their live visuals for shows they do around the world in, you know, on big huge screens, begins to have a physicality to it, and I think it can sort of cross from being pixels into something that you can feel. So I think that's kind of where I want to keep going.
Yeah, but it can be shut down and then it disappears, so it has this ghosty quality about it.
I mean, maybe that's what I love about it. Maybe because one thing I find interesting is thinking about how all of this data that we consume is going to be stored, and how, you know, in 20 years time, will people have photos of themselves now? You know, if Facebook deletes them, you know, this huge amount of memory's gone. I think that it's a really important issue that I think not many people talk about too much. It's sort of about how we archive things and how we save this data, because not only artwork, but our everyday lives, you know, in museums, we often look at the lives of ordinary people who lived, you know, within the 18th century and things like that. Or, you know, when photography was first invented, we sort of see snapshots into lives, but, you know, how do we store these now?
Exactly, because the pictures of myself that I have is the picture that was made by you know, how it's called, like mechanical camera, and the photos that I printed one day. And now I'm taking picture on my phone, and then I lost 2 phones, and I lost all the pictures I made for a long period of my life, and I don't have it anymore.
Exactly, and I think that
the fragility of this data, it's like you don't have it actually.
Exactly, and I think technology is often seen as a very strong, sort of sure thing. You know, we trust technology with so much, especially, you know, with the pandemic. I think people have seen technology as a more viable way to connect with people and to continue business and personal relationships. You know, we're speaking over Zoom now, and it feels more, you know, I didn't know what Zoom was 7 months ago, but it's become even more embedded within our sort of everyday lives. But there is a fragility to technology, and I think that's kind of what I like about it as well, is that I kind of push it into something that feels a bit more humanized.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Yeah, that we have this illusion that we can store everything and then we can archive everything. The data is something, you know, that will be kept forever. But then,
is that it? And you know, it's an abstract idea that our photos and things are sent to a cloud now, but you know, it's hard to know what that's going to mean in 50 or 100 years. You know, are these memories going to exist anymore? And I think that's a really important topic.
Yeah. And how do you reflect it in your work? This, or you just keep it like unknown?
I think there's always you know, I like investigating technology as it's something that I'm always trying to understand. There's never going to be a moment where I get everything about it, and if I did, I'd be bored of it and want to move on. You know, there's every day I work with technology, it shows me new things that I couldn't have imagined. Even on, you know, some of the worst days where nothing's working right, there might be, you know, something might glitch into something that is a completely new vision, and it's that sort of mystery that keeps me sort of enchanted of it.
I see. And do you imagine your artworks in the museum in the future? I mean, in terms of this, you know, we have this old masterpieces in the museum, and we have your ghosty sculptures.
I don't know about that. I have worked with museums before, though. I did a project with the Victoria and Albert Museum here in London a year ago, where I reimagined the jewelry they had within a collection and 3D scanned it and then created new imagery from it. And I think that that's quite an interesting concept, is that technology can be a layer to the world we live in. So seeing things that have existed from, you know, the jewelry was made in 1800 or something, I think, but sort of technology adding another sort of ghostly layer to it, you know, updating things. I think that's where, you know, technology is strongest, where it sort of augments and enhances the real world. So, you know, and there's definitely still a space for physical craftsmanship and things like that. And I would hate for everything to just be virtual and digital. I think one thing that people sometimes think is that I would only sort of work with technology, but I'd equally love to try working with like an old camera and try and find glitches within that.
Are you going to augment yourself with technology one day? Like to put some implants in your brain or eyes?
I mean, I would be up for it. Why not? I think, I mean, it's hard to know where, you know, I remember when computers, when I was at school, were a big, huge box with little green writing on. And for, you know, and we, you know, and see where we are now is, you know, such an incredible leap and such an incredible time to have lived through to see that real transition. So, you know, it's impossible to say where it's going to go, but we have to embrace it.
Yeah, I think so. And the last question, what is your dream? What is your dream project, and what is your dream in general?
So my dream project would be, I would love to make a horror film one day. I'd like to move into sort of longer form pieces of content, because at the moment everything I make is very short, but purposely, I think, because it sort of speaks to the social media world we're in now, where everyone's got an attention span that lasts this long. But I think sort of immersing myself in a really long form project would be fun.
Why horror?
Why? I just love horror films.
You like horror? Why?
Yeah. I think that they're just they've inspired a lot of my work. You know, I think there's the idea of transformation within horror films is quite common. You know, I love maybe it's not a horror film, but I love The Fly. I love The Thing, and you know, I just think that creating something that feels atmospheric and moves people in that way is, you know, that's really appealing to me.
But you appreciate this scary component in horror films, because
Yeah, absolutely.
might be not scary. It might be like, you know, some other genre.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know. It's just a dream of mine to make a horror film.
Nice. What about? Do you know the subject already?
Oh, sorry.
Do you know the subject of your future horror film already?
Not yet, but perhaps with some technology involved somehow.
So you think there is something scary about technologies?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think
How would you define it?
It's scary how we are, you know, things like our identities being hacked and stolen. Is you know, there's probably nothing worse, is there, than, you know, your identity being questioned and manipulated and used. You know, things that, you know, we're fed news articles, some of them from sources that have awful intentions. There's a definite dark side to technology that we're all aware of, you know, and I think that the policing of that is something that is, you know, is in its infancy still. I think we're yet to see how the good and bad of technology, you know. I think as far as good as technology can be, you know, people always find ways to utilize that for, you know, wrong things.
I see, you're right. And your dream, beside your professional activity?
I mean, a dream at the moment would be that the world returns to somewhat of a normal state after everything people have been living through. I think we've all been living through a bit of a nightmare for the last, God knows how long it is, 7 months, or it feels like 10 years. But
do you believe it's possible?
I mean, I think that things will change. I think that, again, you know, we use technology now more, and I think that that's a good thing. I think there might be, hopefully we take some positives away from it. But yeah, it would be good for things to return.
Yeah, I agree with you at this point. Thank you so much. It was a very interesting interview, really.
I hope it was okay.
Yeah, it was great. Absolutely. So keep in touch.
Thanks so much. Nice to speak to you.